Right, we are going to go through the questions and give a brief explanation, some concepts, or justify why we are opting for given responses as the correct responses to the given questions. As usual, we understand that our paper is comprised of two sections, with question 1 and question 2, which is our question number 1, rural urban settlements, 60 marks in the economic geography of South Africa. 60 marks in section B, as usual, is geographical skills and techniques, which is composed of 30 marks. Right. Going to our first question. Our first question on rural urban settlements. It's a matching column question. We're supposed to match a description to a given geographical concept. Right. So we have the description on the left side, which is supposed to be matched with the corresponding correct geographical term on the right-hand side. Right. We are starting with the first description. It says, exact piece of land that a settlement is built on. We are looking at the exact piece of land. The correct response is a site of a settlement. Right. While we're saying a site, we're saying a site that is the physical place which is occupied by a given settlement. So it's the exact land, piece of land on which a settlement is established. The situation, we are now relating the settlement to the surrounding environment. So the correct response for number 111 is set. Then we go to the next question. A situation of commercial livestock farm is influenced by. The situation of a commercial livestock farm. Right, our question here is based on a commercial livestock. What influences the establishment of a commercial livestock farm in the surrounding, regarding its surroundings? So regarding its surroundings, we're looking at a commercial livestock farm. We know that when we're talking of commercial farmers, their main purpose is to produce produce for sale. So they should consider the availability of markets in their surroundings. So the correct response is set for question number 112. Right, I'll go to number 113. Settlements located close to a water source in arid areas. For example, if you can talk of the desert areas, you find that settlements are established on the oasis, which is the source of water. What kind of settlement is that one? Remember, we classify settlements in relationship to water. We have a wet point and a dry point settlement. So for this instance, our correct response is supposed to be a wet point settlement. The reason for the establishment is to access water because the area is arid or is dry. Right, we'll go to the next question. The shape of this settlement is influenced by a river. We're looking at the shape of the settlement and how does a settlement shape develop in regard to it being located to where there is a river. Right, you tend to find that the correct response is linear. Linear from line. The settlement will develop in a line along the river. Right, the largest rural type of settlement, remember when I'm looking at the urban hierarchy, we have three types of settlements which are rural, then we go to the urban settlement starting with a town. So the largest for the rural is a village. Remember, on the hierarchy of settlements from the rural area, the smallest one is an isolated farmstead, and the next one is a hamlet, and the third one is a village, which is the largest of the three rural settlements. To move on to the next question, greater profits are associated with this settlement pattern. We are looking at profits here. Which one gets more profits? We are looking at a dispersed and a nucleated. Which one has more profits? We tend to find that with a dispersed, the farmer is located away from others on his own or her piece of land, doing her own production or his production on his own land. And with nucleated, usually the farmers are settled in a nucleated cluster and they share the pieces of land for farming. So the one which is most likely to reap more profits is the one which is a dispersed one, where the farmer does farming on his or her own piece of land away from the next farmer. Then land returned to the original owners, right? When we are returning land to the original owners, we are restituting. So the correct response is land restitution for that question. Then economic challenge of land reform. We're looking at something which is economic there. So between the two, which one is economic poverty or legal disputes? This one is political. So a poverty is a socio-economic issue. So correct response. Right, I'll move on to the next question. That is a multiple choice section. Right, starting with the first question. The smallest urban settlement in an urban hierarchy. When you are ranking settlements according to the hierarchy of settlements, the smallest starts with a town when you are in the urban settlements. So the correct response is a town. Right, number 122. A dash has the smallest number of settlements. Which one has got the smallest number of settlements? Definitely, it's a town that has got the smallest number of settlements. Right. We move on to the next question. A dash is the largest settlement found in South Africa. Found in South Africa, what is the largest kind of settlement that we find in South Africa? For that matter, our correct response is a conurbation. In this instance, our conurbation, we are having the Joburg, Pretoria. Thus, the conurbation for South Africa. Those two cities are merging. They are getting to infuse each other. There's no more distinct physical boundary between them. So we regard that as a conurbation. Two cities are merging to become one complete built-up area. Move on to the next area. Next question, number 124. Right, the question says dash is an urban settlement type made up of a major city and towns. There's a major city and surrounding towns which are under the jurisdiction of the major city. What kind of an urban settlement is that one? The correct response is a metropolis, which is A. Right, move on to the next question. The dash of a city covers a large area than a town. Which one covers a larger area than of a town? Right, basically the correct response for that one is the sphere of influence. The sphere of influence, you're looking at the area from which a settlement draws customer supporting services offered therein. So the sphere of influence for a city is wider because mainly cities, they provide high order services or high order goods. They are high order senders. So basically their spheres of influence are larger. They cover a wide area compared to a town because a town offers relatively low order goods or services and it's a lower order sender compared to a city. Therefore, its sphere of influence is relatively covering a smaller area compared to that of a city. Right, we'll move on to the next question. Question number 126. A university has a dash range and a dash sphere of influence. I think you understand the concept of the range of goods. When we're talking of the range of goods, we're looking at the distance that a customer is prepared to travel to get access to a good or a service. Right, so when you're looking at a university, university is a high order service. So definitely for a high order service, people are prepared to travel for longer distances to acquire the service. So it must be a larger range for that matter. And also the sphere of influence, remember, high order services, they attract people from distances, which means that their sphere of influence is also going to be bigger compared to that of a school. A university versus a school, a university is a high order service, while a school is a lower order service when you're comparing those two. So it must be a larger range and a larger sphere of influence, which is option number C. Right, move on to the next question. The range associated with the purchase of a motor vehicle is greater than the purchase of bread because, right, you are comparing a motor vehicle, which is a high order good, versus bread, which is a convenient good or a low order good. Comparing those two, you tend to find that we take considerable effort in buying a motor vehicle than the way we buy bread. So which one is which there? We are comparing the purchase of a motor vehicle and the purchase of bread, right? So basically, we are saying in that response, a motor vehicle is more expensive. Comparing a motor vehicle to bread is more expensive. That's correct. Is purchased on a daily basis? No. You cannot purchase motor vehicles on a daily basis. Those are durable goods and which are expensive. No one can afford to do that. Is not purchased frequently. Not purchased frequently. Yes. We don't purchase motor vehicles frequently. And it's less expensive. This is the wrong response. So combining the two, we have item number 1 and item number 3, which come as option C. Right, I will move on to the next question. Right, the next question is refer to the sketch and graph below showing the levels of poverty caused by rural-urban migration. Right, you should be able to figure out the trends on the infographic given on the graph. We have, if you check on this graph here, starting from 1994 to 2024, it has percentage level of poverty, which means these readings are representing the percentage level of poverty. And we also have these indicators of the two graphs. This broken line is represent the level of poverty of young adults that remain in rural areas. The level of poverty for those that choose to remain in the rural areas, and then this one, a solid line, it is showing the level of poverty for young adults that migrate to urban areas. Right, so going on to our questions, question number 131. Define the term rural-urban migration. That one is a concept, the geographical concept. You should define it in your own geographical sense as long as you are addressing the basic requirements of the concept. So basically, I would define it as refers to the movement, because there is migration here. Migration, we know that is movement of people from the rural areas into cities and towns. That's basically the idea of rural-urban migration. Someone is moving from a rural area going to an urban area. And what is an urban area? Referring to cities and towns. So basically, that's the movement of people from rural areas or the countryside into cities and towns. The geographical concept, you can define it in whatever your geographical understanding, but as long as you're addressing the effect of movement and also the direction of movement, that the movement is coming from the rural going to an urban. Right. According to the graph, the percentage level of poverty decreased by a smaller amount in which areas? Is it in rural areas or in urban areas? The percentage level of poverty decreased by a smaller amount. If you check the two graphs here, this graph is showing that the percentage level declined sharply from 1994 until 2024. But this one, if you check, it declined just slow. There is just a smaller change, a smaller decline from around 80 to around 75, somewhere there in 2024. There's not much change, but this change is now getting to slightly above 30 from 80 in 2024. So if we try to compare those two, we tend to find that this one here is the one that has got the smallest change in the percentage of the levels of poverty, which has been experienced between those two. So if we go to our indications here of the graphs, we see that the broken graph is representing the poverty of young adults that remained in the rural areas. So our response here is rural area. How has unemployment contributed to this trend in poverty levels in question answer 1.3 to 0.3.2? Right, we are saying unemployment contributed to this trend. Why is it that unemployment is contributing to the trend of this small drop in the levels of poverty? Right. In fact, the question is requiring you to explain how unemployment is contributing towards high levels of poverty, because the poverty just declined by a small percentage for those young adults who choose to remain in the rural areas. So the question is relating unemployment to the levels of poverty. Unemployment and poverty, what's the relationship between the two? In other ways, that is the question. Right. So we are saying in this instance, or before we look at that one, I've skipped how is unemployment? Yes, question number 1.3.3. Right, we are saying, how are those two related? With high unemployment, in the rural areas there. The consequence of unemployment in rural areas is that there's no source of income. And without a source of income, therefore there's poverty. Or we can say with unemployment, you don't have income. And without income, can't afford the basics. Someone who is poor is someone who is living below the poverty line. Someone who can't afford the basics. So with unemployment here, you don't have income. And without income, you can't afford the basics. So that is the description that is required there. You're supposed to show how unemployment contributes towards poverty. Unemployment limits your ability to earn an income. If you're unemployed, you don't have a source of income. And without a source of income, definitely you can't afford the basics. And you are qualified to become a poor person. So that's the description that is required by the question. In fact, the question is required you to analyze how unemployment leads to poverty. Right, then we'll go on to the next question. Next question is saying, how does the movement of young adults to urban areas have a negative social impact on rural community? Right, the question here is specific. It wants social impacts. When a question is asking about social impacts, it's asking about how society is affected, social from society, the way of life of people, how is it affected negatively when the young adults are moving to urban areas? People remaining in the rural areas, how are they impacted? How is their way of life affected negatively? That is the question. As a society, right? So what you should highlight here, you should try to figure out responses that are social. And you should figure those responses which have something to do with how the society is going to be affected. How the society is going to be affected. Right. So if we check that situation, we are saying these are the young adults who are mainly moving out of the rural areas, going to the cities and towns. So who is being left behind? If the young adults are the ones who are moving to cities and towns, who are leaving the rural areas to go and find opportunities in the cities and towns. Definitely, we have the problem of aging population. That can be one social problem that you can have, or social negative implication of the movement. We can talk of problems, impacts like the impact of aging population. The rural areas will now remain with people who are aged because those people are not moving. The young are the ones who are moving. So these ones, the aging population remains without support. They do not have physical support since the active ones are the ones who are moving out of the rural areas. And also you can talk of the impact on, it impacts negatively on the young dependent. The young dependent are left without care. Those ones who are below the economically active age population, they are also left in the rural areas without proper care of the economically active population. So it's a social implication that we now have kids who are left behind, who are unattended, who are supposed to be attended by those young adults. And also we can talk of the problem of a breakup of family ties. The social breakup of family ties. The families are no longer intact because of that movement. Some of the family members who are aged, they are remaining in the rural areas, while those who are active, they are moving to cities and towns. So that has got a negative implication on the family. They have this breakup of the family ties. So basically, we are looking at aspects that have something to do with the way of life of people in the rural areas, how lives of people in the rural areas are negatively impacted as a society. How does that impact on the society in the rural areas? Right? There are so many responses that you can figure out from that. But as long as you are addressing on a social perspective, is something that has to do with the society of the rural areas, and in a negative way. How are they impacted in a negative way because of the movement to urban areas, which is done by the young adults. Right. We go on to the next question. Suggest strategies that can be introduced in rural areas to reduce the movement of young adults to urban areas. We are looking at sustainable strategies that can be implemented to reduce the trend of rural-urban migration. And this must be introduced in the rural areas. There are so many strategies. We're not going to exhaust them. Just going to highlight some of them. We can talk of employment creation initiatives. Employment creation initiatives. New ways of trying to create employment in the rural areas so that they are gainfully employed and also they do not have a motive of moving to cities and towns. Or you can talk of industrial decentralization. If we decentralize industries into rural areas, it also means that the rural areas will benefit from employment opportunities from those industries. So there's no more incentive for people to move from rural areas going to cities and towns. And also we can talk of provision of education, better education provision, or even you can talk of higher education in the rural areas, because some of the young adults, they move for the sake of attaining higher education. So if universities are also introduced in the rural areas, it will also act as a way of reducing the rural-urban migration trend. And we can also talk of a better housing in the rural areas. The government, through the initiatives like the Reconstruction and Development Program, they can also introduce better housing. Or we can talk of better access to services, e.g. clean water or sanitation. That can also be an incentive. Or we can talk of introducing irrigation farming for the farmers in rural areas, for them to realize agricultural production so that they benefit from their activities in the rural areas and they do not think of moving to urban areas. So there are so many strategies that you can talk about. We cannot exhaust them, but just highlighting some of the possible strategies that can be put in place to address the problem of extensive rural-urban migration. So basically, that was question number 1.3, and it was basically an average question, which we expect an average learner to score even maximum marks 15 out of 15. But the question was just a simple and a straightforward question. There was no complication. There were no complications in the questioning and also in the required responses. Right. We move on to the next question. The next question is referred to the sketch below showing an urban profile. Right, we're looking at an urban profile, right? An urban profile from the CBD to the zone of transition to the residential, industrial, and the rural urban fringe with a stretch of about 25 kilometers radius from the CBD. Right. The first question says, define the concept urban profile. Again, it's a concept. You can define it in your own understanding, but it should have the basics of the geographical concept. Right. Simply, I can define it simply as it refers to the side view of a city from the CBD to the outskirts. That's a simple definition. It's a side view of a city from the CBD to the outskirts of the city. Like what you are seeing here. We are seeing the view of the city from starting from the CBD, we go to the next zone, until we go to the rural urban fringe, which is the outskirts of the city. So basically, we are looking at a side view. We are looking at a town from a view which is sideways, so that we see the different land use zones and also the height of buildings differing from the core of the urban settlement until you get to the outskirts, which is the rural urban fringe of that particular urban settlement. Right. We go on to question number 142. Comment on the height of buildings in the CBD in comparison to those in the rural urban fringe. Right, we are comparing this against this. Comment on the height of buildings in the CBD in comparison to those in the rural urban fringe. It's clear here, these buildings are tall. High-rise buildings, and these ones, you check the height there, you can see that they are not the same. So we have taller buildings or skyscrapers in the CBD, and we have short buildings located away in the rural urban fringe. Right. Then we come here. How has the demand for land influenced the density of buildings in the CBD? The density of buildings in the CBD based on the demand for land. That is what we are trying to convey there. Right. How is the density like against the demand for land? Right. In the CBD, there's high density. The buildings are of high density, meaning to say the buildings are just close to each other. Why are they close? There's no more space. There's high demand for land. So the buildings have high density in the CBD. Why? The demand for land has caused the density to be high. There is high demand for land in the CBD, which contributes to the buildings having a higher density. That's basically the relationship of those two. Because of high demand for land, it has caused high density of buildings in the CBD. Like you know, CBDs, the buildings are just close to each other because there's no space to waste. The space is needed by people for commercial purposes. So because of that high demand, that has led to the space being fully utilized, creating a high density situation in the urban area because of the high demand. So there is high demand for land in the urban area in the CBD, which has contributed to the high density of buildings within the CBD. Right, we'll go on to the next question. Why are both the transition zone and the rural urban fringe referred to as zones of change? Why are they zones of change? We are looking at the zone of transition. This one here, it's a zone of change. And this one here, the zone of change. Why is it regarded as a zone of change? Right. You tend to find that I'll briefly describe the zone of transition, and then we'll try to figure out how best we're supposed to answer the question. The zone of transition, we're looking at the zone with mixed functions, which is just outside the CBD. It's a zone with mixed functions. There can be some light industrial activities taking place. There can also be some residential purposes and some other commercial purposes. And also it's a zone of decay. The zone of decay whereby we have unattended buildings, buildings which are dilapidated, or buildings which are illegally occupied. So we're saying, why is it regarded as a zone of change? And then we'll go to the rural urban fringe. The rural urban fringe again has got mixed functions. It can have some farming functions, which are coming from the rural area. It can have maybe some other functions from the urban area. Maybe talk of golf courses, or it can have maybe some cemeteries. It can have maybe some rifle ranges, or it can also have some airports. Those are mixed functions that are typically found in the rural urban fringe. So why are we regarding them as the zones of change? Zone of change. Right. The fact that they've got mixed functions suggests us that they are part of the change process. If you are coming from the CBD, it's truly commercial, and we are now going to another zone. And in between there is no distinct boundary of activities happening. There is a mix of activities coming from the commercial side and also coming from the next zone. So if you look at the zone of transition, why are we calling it a zone of change? is because here, as we see, the zone of transition, it marks a change from the CBD, which is a commercial and a residential area. So it marks a change in land use zone from commercial to residential. If we check this one here, the zone of transition, right? It is marking a change like what you are seeing where it is there, marks a change in land use. From CBD, which is commercial, land use there is commercial for commercial purposes, and it's changing to residential. This is now the housing of residents. So it's a zone of change because it's in between the commercial land use zone and also bordering with the residential area. So it is marking a change in the land use zone. And also if you check the rural urban fringe, is also a zone of change. Why are we saying it's a zone of change? We said it has mixed functions. It's also a transitional zone. There's change there which is happening. Is demarcating commercial, industrial activities which are part of the urban area, and to the extreme, the town has come or the city has come to an end, which means you're going to a rural area. So it is also marking a change. It marks a change in land use from industrial, in this instance, it's mainly industrial, which is part of urban, it's an urban land use zone, to rural areas. After the zone of transition, we are completely going into a rural area. So it's a zone of change. We are transiting from urban functions going to rural functions. It is a zone between the change process of coming from an urban area going to a rural area. And if you check the zone of transition, is also marking a zone of change from commercial land use zone, which is the CBD, going into residential zone. Right. So basically, that is why we are referring to those functions, those are zones, as zones of change. Right. We move on to the next question. The next question is based on economic reasons why rural urban fringe would be attractive location for commercial activities. We are saying businesses, why is it attractive? Why is the zone of transition attractive for businesses? Why can businesses choose to locate in the zone of transition here? Going all this way from the CBD, moving 25 kilometers out of the CBD to go and do business in the rural urban fringe. Why is it attractive for businesses? That is the question. What is in the rural urban fringe which can attract businesses to want to operate in those areas? Right. If we look at that, we're looking at economic reasons. Right. The first one, definitely, the land value. There's cheap land there. Because of its each being located away from the CBD where the land use values are very high, the zone of transition has got cheaper land value. So economically, that is a reduction in the cost of doing business if you acquire cheaper land to do business from. So it's basically saving on costs for the business because the land is cheaper in that dimension. And also, we can talk of availability of land for expansion. Compared to the CBD. Compared to the CBD, it means these businesses have got potential of expanding and making more profits for themselves if they can expand because they have space for expansion. While it's in the CBD, they are confined to the spaces available. So it's also another factor which can be an attractive factor. And then we can also talk of ease access to raw materials. Since they are located close to the rural area, some of the businesses might be getting raw materials from the rural area. So it's also lucrative that they locate there because it is access of raw materials for the different processes, because there's mixed land use there. It will also imply that in some of the land use, they might be getting some of their raw materials that they use for their business processes, which will be easier for them to operate in those areas. And also, if we can check, we can talk of also market opportunities. And mainly the market there, we talk of the high and middle income. There is market opportunity there for their products if they can locate in the zone of transition, because also remember the low income and the middle income and the high income residential areas, they also locate away from the CBD, which will also make it convenient for them to go and do business in the zone of transition. And therefore, there's a market opportunity for such businesses locating in those areas. Right. So basically, we are looking at those factors as factors which can contribute towards the businesses wanting to locate in the rural urban fringe. Right. We are not limiting it to those responses. We are just highlighting a few responses which are relevant, but we're not saying that's the end of the responses which are correct. There are other also responses which can be correct. We cannot exhaust everything, given that we are just giving each other a highlight of the possible responses for the different questions that you attempted. Right, we move on to the next question, which is question number 1.5. It's talking about upgrading of informal settlements. It's before and after the comparison of the informal settlements which have been upgraded. Right, there is the text. Define the term informal settlement. This is a geographical concept. You can define it in whatever your understanding, but as long as in that definition, you address the basics of an informal settlement. Right. I would simply define it in simple terms, trying to simplify the definition of an informal settlement. I would say maybe it's a residential area. It's a residential area which is illegal. Meaning to say it falls outside of government regulation. Right. The key aspect here is the settlement is illegal. Illegal in the sense that it was not planned for. The government did not decide for the establishment of such a settlement. Is people illegally settling themselves or occupying privately owned lands or state lands and establishing a residential area for themselves. That is an informal settlement. Maybe you can also further describe the nature of the structures that you find there is predominantly structures made of temporary material and cheap material, is to get material like zinc and wood and plastic. That is typical of most of the informal settlements. But in some other instances also, you can find an informal settlement which has got buildings which are decent and up to date. But as long as it's not planned for, it's informal. Because the formal one, it means there has to be approval from maybe the local government that the area has to be developed for residential purposes, and there is approval from the authorities that the area has to be developed for residential purposes. So as long as the area is unauthorized for settlement, is outside of government control, it's illegal, then it's informal. That's the basis of the definition. Right, we'll move on to the next question. So it's a geographical concept. You define it in your own understanding, but as long as it addresses the basis of the concept, then it becomes correct. Right. State one factor in the extract that has a negative impact on the health of residents in informal settlement. Right? We go to the extract and try to figure out where we can find those ones. We are looking at negative implications on the health, factors that cause negative implications on the health of the residents in informal settlements. Right? If we check the second sentence, it says informal settlements are characterized by lack of basic services. This is point number one. If there are no basic services, it means it's a health hazard. Like, for example, there's no clean water supply, there's no sanitation. It's part of basic services. So they are by lack of basic services. And then number two is pollution. Pollution is also a threat to the health of the people, either land pollution or air pollution or water pollution, whichever kind of pollution is a health hazard. Then we go on to overcrowding. It's also a health hazard. Infectious diseases are easily spread because of overcrowding conditions. So it's also a health threat. And also the last one, poor waste management. Poor waste management is also a threat to the health of the people in the informal settlements. So any of those four is a correct response to that particular question as given in the extract. Right, we move on to the next question. Explain two economic reasons for the increase in informal settlement. Our question is economic, which means when you are addressing the question, try to find responses which are economic. Economic, we are looking at something to do with how people make a living, how people earn income, how people make money, how people sustain their lives. So we should try to figure out, because the question is specific, it's not general about any reason, but it wants economic reasons. So in this instance, you can highlight aspects like unemployment. There's high unemployment. It's an economic reason. Talk of unemployment. High unemployment. How is unemployment contributing towards development of informal settlements? People cannot afford rentals in informal settlements. Because of unemployment, they don't have a source of income, therefore they can't afford paying the rentals in the formal settlements or affording building their own houses, which are formal. Then you can also talk of low income, or we can talk of poor salaries. It's economic. People who are earning poor salaries, they cannot afford to stay in the formal settlement or own their own formal houses. Or we can also talk of low economic growth in South Africa. The economy is growing slowly. It's not creating enough jobs. So low economic growth is also another contributing factor, which has led to people staying in informal settlements. Or you can also talk of poverty, extreme poverty in South Africa. People cannot afford the basics and they cannot afford decent accommodation. So those are some of the economic reasons, but we are not saying we are limiting ourselves to those. You can also figure out your other responses based on economic reasons to why there's sprouting of informal settlements across South Africa. Right, we go on to the last question, which is a paragraph question. And also this one is being a paragraph question. You must not put bullets, you must write continuously. And remember, your points must be fully developed with a factor and a qualifier for that particular factor. Right, in a paragraph of approximately 8 lines, explain how the upgrading or improvement of informal settlements would have a positive social impact for people living in these settlements. Here we are also specific. We are not just looking at general impacts, but our focus is on social impacts and positive. If the informal settlement is upgraded, how is that going to impact on the society positively? We are transiting from this situation to this situation. How is this going to impact on the society positively? Right, there are so many responses that you can figure out, but we are going to just focus on some of the possible ones, right? We can talk of improved privacy. If the informal settlements are upgraded, it means now people are now staying in some form of decent structures where they have their own privacy, where they can discuss their own personal issues without the neighbor hearing. So we have privacy improved for the people in that particular settlement. And also we can talk of job creation. For the people, the society will access jobs. In the process of upgrading, it means the local people are involved in the process. In upgrading the infrastructure, the roads in the informal settlements, the local people are involved, they are getting jobs. So it's a societal positive impact. And also, we can talk of reduced crime. Right. In that situation, we are saying criminal activities are more given the disorder that is within the settlement. The structures are not decent and people can just behave anyhow. And given now that they are now having decent structures, it will also imply that the level of crime is going to reduce. And you can also talk of the general improvement of the quality of life. Quality of life improvement. Now people are staying in decent structures, which will also imply that they are now accessing basic shelter, which will complement an improvement in their quality of life. And also you can talk of the health, improvement of the health of the community. Health is impacted positively. Given now that the structures are now proper and also have been upgraded, meaning to say there's now a decent sanitation provision, there's now decent water provision, it will imply that the health will be impacted positively. People's health will also be impacted positively, or the society's health is also going to have an improvement because of improved sanitary situations. And also we can talk of poverty reduction for the society. Right. So these are some of the responses that you can highlight or that you can discuss. Right. That marks at the end of question number 1 with 60 marks. That is rural and urban settlements. Right. The next thing is to go to question number 2. Question number 2 is solely based on the economic geography of South Africa. Right. The first question is basically a multiple choice question. The main difference between small scale and large scale farming is the main. Here we are saying the main. The responses can all be correct, but we want the main in this instance. The 4 responses can be correct, but the question says the main. That is our focus. We want the major difference or the major distinguishing factor between a small scale and a large scale farming practice. That is what the question is asking. They can be a major, then there are other minors, which can be correct, but the question is asking for the main, which means we want the major difference between small scale and large scale. In this instance, it means the major difference here is size of farm holdings. That is the main difference. What differentiates small scale and large scale is the size of the farm holdings. Small scale, they use smaller farm holding, while it's the large scale, they use large holding of land. Right, we go to the next question, 212. Photograph dash below illustrates small scale farming. We are seeing there's this combined harvester, which is harvesting, maybe definitely this is wheat. And we have this cattle farm. This is definitely some form of cattle ranging. And also we have this pivot, which is irrigating this piece of land. And we have these 2 guys who are having watering cans, who are watering probably their vegetables. So those are our 4 forms of farming which are happening. So we want to identify the one which is small scale. Small scale, in the previous question, we said they use smaller, relatively smaller pieces of land. We cannot have a combined harvester over 1 hectare. That does not make sense, which means the land is big here. Given that we are having that big and expensive machinery, you cannot buy a combined harvester to harvest 1 hectare of land. It does not make economic sense. Or we're looking at this cattle farm. Definitely this is cattle ranging. You cannot do cattle ranging over a small piece of land. They need a large piece of land. And then we're looking at this pivot, which is irrigating here. You cannot buy this expensive equipment to irrigate a small piece of land. It does not make sense. And if we check here at S, these guys are operating manually, which means you cannot water manually over 20 hectares. There's no magic like that. So, which means a small scale here, based on the illustrations, the correct response is S. Right, move on to the next question. Characteristic of a small farming evident in the photograph is, right here, what is the evidence that this is small scale? Right, without wasting time, the correct response is they use manual labor. This one is a machinery farm of capital intensive production. Here, though there's manual labor, but there's also some form of mechanization that takes place. Here is some form of mechanization, but these guys, they are doing manual labor. Right, question number 214. Dash is an economic advantage for a farmer practicing large-scale farming. What is the advantage of a large-scale farmer? Right, the correct response there is the usage of machinery, like what we have seen. Large-scale commercial farmers, they have advantage of using farm mechanized equipment to do large-scale production. Right, 215, cattle farming is an activity in the Dash economic sector. When someone is doing cattle farming, definitely that is a primary activity. You are dealing with nature. Agriculture is part of the primary sector. So we are saying the correct response there must be A, right, which is primary. Right, we'll go on to the next question. We are moving on to question number 2.1.6. Distribution of dairy products is an activity in the Dash economic sector. We are looking at distribution. How do we distribute? It's coming from maybe the factory, which is a secondary activity where we are manufacturing the product. Maybe it's ice creams, it's chocolates, whichever milk product, it's whichever milk product. The distribution part, what kind of activity? That one is a tertiary, it's a service. Right. 217, a factor favoring cattle farming in South Africa is Dash. Which one is more prominent? Favoring cattle farming. Heavy rainfall, high temperatures, availability of grazing land, and climatic variation. The correct response there is C, which is availability of grazing lands. Right. 218. Challenges faced by small-scale cattle farmers in South Africa are small-scale cattle farmers. Check the question also before you just answer the question. Small-scale cattle farmers, we are looking at those farmers that are doing cattle production on a small scale. They are using a small piece of land to do cattle farming. What are their problems or the challenges that they are faced with in their business or in their endeavor to try to produce cattle, try to produce a beef and other cattle related products? Right. High rate of unemployment is not related anyhow. Animal diseases is related, is correct. Semi-arid land is very correct and related. Export market is irrelevant because we're talking of small scale. Their target is not to export anywhere. Right, so we are seeing that the response number 2 and response number 3 are relevant to the question. So we look for a response which is measuring those two, and definitely we are seeing that is B, which has got item 2 and item 3. Right, we move on to question number 2.2. Right, 2.21, the main purpose of an industrial development zone is to promote. Is it exports or imports? Right, the purpose of an IDZ is an export-led development strategy that a country can adopt. Export-led development, we are saying the country targets to achieve development through improving its exports. Exports, we are talking of goods or services which are sold to other countries. So in this instance, our correct response is Y, which is exports, without wasting time. It's to improve its exports, which is item Y. Move on to the next question. SDIs are generally located in the Dash areas. Spatial development initiatives, they are initiatives by the government to target to develop areas which have got potential for development, but which are under development, which are typically featured with high unemployment and high levels of poverty. But those areas have got potential for development. Either they have got resources which can sustain development in those areas. So the government targets to develop infrastructure and to do initiatives in those areas so that the areas will develop gradually and move away from high levels of poverty. So the correct response there is underdeveloped. A positive economic impact of spatial development initiatives is, the question here is saying economic. Check on the question. Quality of life is not economic, it's social. So the correct response is upgraded infrastructure. The social challenge experienced in the Saldanha Bay. Saldanha Bay, what is the challenge that is experienced? And we want a social. Unskilled workforce and poor harbor facility. This is not social. Harbor facilities are not social, they are economic. So the correct response here, or they are physical. The correct response here is unskilled workforce. The main industry associated within the West Coast is A or N, right? We know that there is steel production there. If you have done your case study very well, that is the correct response, right? The Southwestern Cape Core Industrial Region is restricted by, what is the major restriction? Is it mineral resources or a small local market? Basically, is few mineral resources. There are limitations of mineral resources in that particular area, if you have done your case study very well. Right, we go to number 227. A physical factor that promotes industries in the Southwestern Cape, a core industrial region. A physical factor. Here, you should be worried about the question. Physical. So it says overseas markets. This is economic. Coastal location. That is the correct response. It's located on the coast, on the deep coast, along the Saldanha, where we can actually have proper shipping of the commodities and also linking to supply of raw materials from abroad. Right, we go on to the next question. The next question is South Africa core exports and employment. It's a question based on coal mining in South Africa. There are those graphs. There's a graph there which shows runs in billions which have been earned from export of coal and number of employees employed in the sector. Right, and the years from 2016 to 2023, and number of employees on the left and exports in billions of rands on the extreme right side. So if you check these two graphs, this graph here, which is broken, the broken line is showing the trend of the income which has been earned from the export of coal, which we read from the right. And this graph here is showing employment statistics in the coal mining industry, which we also read from the left readings. Right. The first question is saying, according to the graph, what amount of coal in billions was exported in 2023? We want the exports in billions for 2023. Our 2023 is here, so which means our reading must be coming from here, because this is the reading which talks about exports in billions. So we want our reading along this, and on this line here is corresponding to reading of rands in billions, and our reading is here. So it means our point that we want is this point here. So what is the reading there? Without wasting time, is 250 billion. So our correct response for this one here, the first one is 250 billion. Right. Go on to the next question. What has been the general trend in profits from exports of coal in the recent years? When we're looking at a trend, we are looking at whether there was an increase or there was a decrease. If you want to be specific, then you describe the increase or you describe the decrease, whether it's a sharp or it's a gradual, or it's a sharp decline or a gradual decline. But basically a trend is either is it increasing or is it decreasing. What has been the general trend in profits from the export of coal in recent years? In recent years, you are saying in the most current years, we cannot say 2016 is recent. Recent years from now, we're 2024. It means recent years, maybe starting from 2022, 23, 24. Those are the recent years. So if you can take 22 as our recent year, you check here in 2022, it was somewhere there. And in 2023, it was there. What is the trend between these two? There's an increase. So the trend that we want there is in the recent years, there was an increase. Right, move on to the next question. According to the graph, between which years was the smallest number of employees recorded in the coal mining industry? Which means we want the reading of the employees in the coal mining industry, and we want to check where we have the least number of employees who were employed in the sector. Right, if we check on our graph here, our graph declines at this particular point for the workforce. Because this line here is the one that's showing the number of workers employed. And if we check here, it was below 80,000, declining from around 90,000. From over 90,000, it went down and went to below 80,000, which is around 75,000 workers employed in the coal mining industry in South Africa. So between which years, if we check, it's in between 2021 and 2022. This is 2021 and this is 2022. The sharp decline here is in between those 2 years. So we are saying between which years? Between 2021 and 2022. Those are the 2 years in which there was a sharp decline. Give one possible reason for small number of employees. Definitely, we know what was happening during that time. There was COVID-19. COVID-19, which led to a decline in the workforce because of the restrictions like social distancing, which made, and also because of job losses, people were retrenched, and also because of reduced demand. It led to a downfall in the workforce size employed in the mining sector and across other sectors also. Right, that was the reason. We go on to the next question. According to the extract, the high-quality coal reserves in South Africa have been decreasing over the years. Explain the negative impact of decreasing high-quality coal reserves for future supply of power in South Africa. How is it going to impact the power supply, given that the quality reserves are declining in their quantities with continued mining over the years? So if you are explaining this, the implications on, want to try to analyze the implications on the power supply. There will be limited power supply in the future. Because the quality core is now declining, it also implies that power generation is going to be limited and it's going to limit the supply of power. Or we can say there will be increased load shedding in the future. Load shedding is going to increase. Because remember, the biggest contributor of the energy supply is through the coal-powered fire station, coal-fired power stations in South Africa. So it means load shedding is going to increase in the future. And also, we can say power prices are going to increase. Given the demand and supply situation, the prices are going to increase. There will be less supply given and also versus higher demand. And that is going to affect the price of power in the future. Power is going to increase in future. Right. That is with the power situation, the future of power supply in South Africa. And also we can talk of the government has to make initiatives to use alternative sources of power supply besides relying on coal fired power stations. They must try to make initiatives or to come out with new inventions to generate power, unlike relying on coal, which is now at the risk of getting depleted. Explain why the coal mining industry is important to the economy of South Africa. That is a general question. To the economy of South Africa, we are saying, why is coal mining important for the economy of South Africa? Right, there are so many, we will not limit ourselves to what we're going to discuss here, since there are lots of things that you can discuss. You can talk of GDP contribution. Coal mining contributes towards the GDP of South Africa. Or we can talk of employment creation for the economy of South Africa. So many people are employed in the mining sector and in the related industries. Or we can talk of the multiplier effect, which is brought by coal mining. There's got a multiplier effect. It's going to stimulate the development of other related industries, which will boost the economy of South Africa. You can talk of infrastructure development, like roads, railway lines, to link the mines to the market, and also to link to other important components of the mining process. Then you can also talk of other things like skills development. Skills development is also a positive implication for the people of South Africa. The mines, they do engage in skills development, training the different trades which are required in the mining industry. And also you can talk of contribution tax revenue to the government. The government gets tax revenue from the companies which are doing mining in the country. And also, you can talk of, there's a lot that you can talk of there. You cannot exhaust all the points. There are so many aspects that you can discuss about under that particular topic of the contribution of mining, coal mining to the economy of South Africa. Or you can also talk of the development of other related industries which use coal, or you can talk of coal being also a source of fuels, which is a major component which is required in the production process in the country. It stimulates production through extraction of fuels from coal. Right. Move on to the next question. We're not limiting ourselves. We are done with question number 2.3. We move on to question 2.4. 2.4 is based on the PWV core industrial region. There is a text there, and also, right, there's also this infographic, which has got the roots and also the statistics. Right. Let's go to question number 2.41. Refer the statistics and state the percentage that the Gauteng PWV, core industrial region, contributes to the GDP of South Africa. Right, we are looking at the statistics here. We go to our infographic, don't want to waste time. Statistics are shown in this box here. So we want the contribution to the GDP of the country. How much is the industrial region contributing towards the GDP of South Africa? We find our response here. It says 31% of, not this one, it says 38% contribution to the GDP of South Africa. So our correct response is here for question number 2.4.1 is 38% according to the statistics which are given on the infographic there. Right, we move on to the next question. It says, quote evidence from the extract that shows why 31% of South Africa's labor force is found in the Gauteng PWV core industrial region. Quote evidence from the extract that shows why 31% of the labor force is found in that particular industrial region. Right. If we come to our infographic, it says 31% of South Africa's labor force in all economic sectors. On the statistics is supporting our question here. And we want a text which we can quote, which suggests that 31% of the labor force is in that particular industrial region. Right. If we check here, it says about 10,000 businesses involved in the province manufacturing sector employ over 500,000 people. Basically, that is where we get our response on the numbers of people who are employed. 500,000 people are employed in the 10,000 businesses which are in the province manufacturing sector. Right. Refer to the sketch and explain the role of the major roads in supporting industrial development in Gauteng PWV. The major roads in supporting this. We are having these major roads here, as indicated here. So we want to justify how these roads are supporting the development of industries in this particular industrial region. Right. So we can talk of maybe this route here. Why is it important? We are coming out of the Vernaken area. We are going south. This definitely will lead us to the harbors. The major routes are linking to the harbors for export market. We want the export market to sell the produce from the core industrial region. So if we have a route which is coming out in this direction, definitely it can lead to the harbors where we go to export the products for the export market. Then we can also check off these ones. It's going to Potchefstroom, Klerksdorp. This one is going to Secunda. We can talk of domestic market. Supplying products to the domestic market. Or we can also talk of, this one is coming from, is going to Wheatbank, is linking to Wheatbank. We know that in Wheatbank, there are also some mineral resources. We can talk of raw materials. supply. Access to raw materials. The routes are allowing access to raw materials. And you can talk of this one also is going to meet somewhere in the extreme northeast. You can also talk of raw materials coming from this other side, the side of Middelburg. Then around here, these major routes, we can talk of these routes coming to Rustenburg. We can link them to labor supply. The major routes facilitate labor supply. People coming to work in the core industrial region, some of them coming out of the region, they use those major routes for transportation purposes to their workplaces and out of away from their work places. So basically those routes, you justify their existence in terms of them linking to the source of raw materials and them linking to the market, and also them linking to labor supply, and also them linking to the domestic market. Basically, that's the idea behind that particular question. Right. Explain two challenges faced by the Gauteng PWV core industrial region. Two challenges. Explain two challenges. There are so many challenges which are faced by this industrial region. We're just going to highlight a few. We're not going to exhaust everything since there are many of them. We just have to talk of just a few of them. There are so many challenges which the industrial region is faced with. Right, we can talk of the region having industrial centralization. It's one of the reason the industries are now over-centralized. There is now over-centralization of industries, which is leading to competition. So we can talk of industrial centralization, which is also causing other problems like pollution. And also we can talk of problems like labor unrest, the influence on trade unions on the labor, which is ultimately affecting production processes. And also you can talk of depletion of raw materials. You can also talk of water challenge because of extreme pollution. Water resources are a challenge. You can also talk of load shedding or power constraints. It's also another limitation in the area. Or you can also talk of other limitations like distance to the harbor. Since it's located centrally on the inland location, it's also away from the harbors, which will add on to the costs of transporting products for the export market. You can also talk of other things like traffic congestion, pressure on infrastructure. There are so many. You cannot exhaust all of them. Right, move on to the next question. Suggest one advantage and one disadvantage of industries moving towards high value added production in the Gauteng PWV, our core industrial region. We want an advantage of industries moving towards high value added production. Right, if you go to our text, if you didn't have an idea of what high value added industrial production is, you're supposed to get it here. On the glossary, it says low value added production is basic production that uses traditional technology and manual labor to operate machinery. That is low value. Then high value, we are saying production that uses advanced technology and highly efficient and is highly efficient. So for example, robotics to operate machinery. So we are saying what is an advantage of using highly advanced technology, like using robots to operate machinery, moving away from manual labor to employ technical means of doing production. So obviously, an advantage there is mass production. The industries are going to enhance into mass production. They're going to produce a lot of products since they are now engaging in efficient production methods. That is going to contribute towards mass production. It's an advantage. And also that is going to make sure that there is increased profits. The businesses. And also it will mean with increased profits, it will also mean there will be higher incomes for the workforce. Then the disadvantage with this system here creates unemployment. The work that was supposed to be done by manual labor now is being done by machines and is done by robots, which automatically means it's going to create unemployment for the people in the area. And also, we can talk of the time factor. It's time consuming to implement and it's expensive to acquire such. It comes at an expense to acquire such. So you just have to figure out the advantages of this industrial revolution, the fourth industrial revolution, versus the third industrial revolution. We are now engaging into highly sophisticated modes of production. How is it going to impact positively and negatively on the society and the businesses in the PWV region? Right. So we cannot limit ourselves to that. There are lots. You can also talk of reduction in the prices of products. It's an advantage. Because of mass production, it will also mean that the prices are going to decline, which will make products affordable on the side of the advantages. Right. We go on to question number 2.5. It's an extract on the informal sector. Right. It has a text and a graph. Right, the first question is saying, according to the extract, what is the percentage of informal trading that takes place in Johannesburg? The extract is here. We go to the extract. What is the percentage? 30% of which occurs in Johannesburg. So it's 30%. Quote evidence from the extract why trading has been restricted in Johannesburg at night. We want to check for evidence why it is restricted that trading takes place at night in the city of Johannesburg. Right. It says here the restrictions include traders sleeping overnight as it exposes them to criminal activities. So this is where we get our evidence. The restrictions include traders sleeping overnight as it exposes them to criminal activities. That is where we got our evidence here. It exposes them to criminal activity. We know that criminals, they thrive mainly during the dark hours of the day. That is why they are restricting activities happening overnight, for they will be prone to criminal activities overnight. Right, move on to the next question. According to the graph, which is the busiest time period for trading in the informal sector? We go to our graph and identify the highest point of our line graph. We are seeing that the highest point is here. That is where we find the highest activity taking place. Percentage is on this side, and we check is slightly somewhere around 35%. Then we go to our horizontal axis. We want to identify the time here. If we go, we tend to find that this is the time at which we reach at the peak of our economic activity happening in the informal sector in Joburg. So our correct response is that is between 1600 hours to 1800 hours of the day. That is 4 p.m. to around 6 p.m. So it's 1600 to around 1800 hours. That is where there is highest activity happening in the informal sector. Suggest two reasons for the rapid growth in informal sector in the city of Johannesburg. Why do we have so many people engaging in the informal sector? There are so many reasons for that, why we tend to have so high numbers of people in the informal sector. The first reason is unemployment in the formal sector. Because of high unemployment in the formal sector, people are opting to engage themselves in the informal sector. The formal sector is failing to absorb all the people, hence people are finding their way to survive from the informal sector. Then you can also talk of the slow economic growth. The economy is not growing at a pace which allows for the absorption of all people into economic activities. So people will end up engaging in the informal sector. Then you can also give rapid rural-urban migration. It's also another reason. So many people migrating from rural areas into cities and towns. It has also contributed towards the informal sector getting filled up with people. And also you can talk of lack of skills. Some of the skills that are required in the formal sector are not readily available amongst the people, and they will engage in what they are good at. And also you can talk of lack of documentation, specifically for foreign nationals. They do not have the proper documentation like the work permits, which will limit their access to the formal sector, and hence they will engage in the informal sector because of that limitation of the documentation required to be engaged in the formal sector. And you can also talk of excessive tax. We know well that if a business is registered formally, it's supposed to pay tax. And also there's bureaucracy in the process of registering the business formally. So some businesses are thriving because they want to avoid paying taxes because they are excessive, and also the process is time consuming and is actually delayed along the hierarchy of command in the offices. So you tend to find that those are some of the reasons why the informal sector, there are so many reasons. We are not limiting ourselves to those. There are some of the reasons that we can talk about if we talk of the informal sector. Why is it improved? Why is it increasing, or why are the numbers for the people engaged in the informal sector on the increase across the board? Right. So we are saying, given those reasons, that is basically the address to the question or the response to our question on the informal sector. Right, number 225. In a paragraph of approximately 8 lines, explain measures that the municipality can put in place to assist traders in the informal sector to operate under more favorable conditions. That is a paragraph question. What has the municipality to do to actually lessen the burden that is faced by traders in the informal sector? Right, you can talk of access, allowing access to basic services, e.g. water or sanitation. Right, if these traders are given an opportunity to have access to basic services, it will make their life easier, and they will operate on a more favorable condition if they have access to basics like water, sanitation, and also refuse removal. And also you can talk of provision of shelter to work from. And usually because of harsh weather conditions. The informal traders usually are faced with harsh weather conditions. On a cold day, they are faced with the coldness. On a rainy day, sometimes they can't even operate. So if the government can provide shelter facilities to accommodate them to do their businesses, that can also be a positive move towards them being afforded a chance to have favorable conditions in their work. And also you can talk of registering them in their database so that they can also allocate contracts to them. If they are known, then they can be given contracts in the formal sector to supply certain products or to perform certain duties. And then it will make life easier for them if they are registered and the government is knowing, the municipality is knowing them, and they can also afford them chances to engage with the formal sector to supply some of the products to the formal sector. And also we can talk of promoting safety standards for them. They are exposed to risky conditions in their work. If the municipality can also enforce safety standards for them and also advise them on funding. Their major challenge is accessing funds to improve their production process and their business operations. So if the government, the municipality also can advise them on funding, how they can access funding, such as maybe the public funds. If there's a facility which allows them to borrow money, which they can return after they make some profits in their operations, that will also assist them in their operations. Right? There are so many things that we can talk about. We cannot exhaust everything. Those are some just highlight of some of the ways that the municipality can put in place to try and solve those issues involved with the informal sector in their operations. Right. So that brings us to the end of section A. which is a total of 120 marks on the two questions: economic geography of South Africa and rural and urban settlement, which is question number 1. Now we move on to section B, question number 3, which is geographical skills and techniques. Right. This question is based on map provided of Bloemfontein, and there's map information provided there. You're also supposed to read it. It will help you in somehow in answering some of the questions as the questions come. Right. Then we go to question 3.11. The topographical map or orthophoto map has a smaller scale. Which one has got a smaller scale? Which one is small? We are comparing the two scales. We know our scales for the topographic is 1:50,000. And for the orthophoto is 1:10,000. So the question is saying which one is small, 1:50,000 or 1:10,000. When we are comparing these two scales, this is a small scale and this is a large scale. So this is for the orthophoto and this is for the topographic. So the question is saying which one is a smaller scale. So the correct response is topographical. It is a small scale. Topographical, in this instance, that is our small scale when we are comparing those two maps. So the correct response is topographical for the first question. The topographical is the one that has got a smaller scale. Right, going to the next question. The map scale shows a map scale, a small scale map shows what? A small scale map like a topographic map. It shows a small area. That is wrong. A small scale map, it shows a wide area. It shows greater detail. That is wrong. Some information is left out because of the area coverage. So those two responses are wrong. So the correct response is item number 3. It covers a large area. That is correct. And it shows less details. So we want a response which has got item 3 and item 4. So the correct response for that question definitely is item number, is response item D. That is the correct response. Right. We move on to the next question. The grid reference of the reservoir at F in block B1 on the topographical map on the topographical map is what? Right. For this question here, you have to do the odd one out before you even waste your time. Right. By checking on the coordinates, degree values and minute values, which are already provided on the map so that you don't waste time. Right. Where is our, from the question, we want to deal with our reservoir at F in block B1. Let's go to block B1. Reservoir at F, we find that our F is there. That is where the reservoir is from this point here. Right. So what are we doing here? We are worried about this block. If you are to check on our area of concentration, the reservoir is here, like where you are seeing is here, where F is pointing. Right. So our block is where? Our block is this one. Starting from here, that is where our block is starting from. Right. Our block is this one. From the top, it comes here, it goes there, straight down, and is here. Sorry, that is not straight. Right, if I can at least make a straight line. Right, our block, this one. Right, and this one. So we are worried about this block here. This is where our reservoir is. So remember, when you are picking coordinates, we use the northwest corner of the block, or northwest corner is this one. We want to identify the degree value of latitude and minute value first for that particular corner. Right, starting from here, we are seeing that our first line of latitude has got 29 degrees from there and 0.1 minutes to the south, which means the next line is still within 29 degrees. And the minute line is the one that is going to change. We are increasing our minute values going to the south. This is 0.1 minutes, and it means the next line is going to be 0.2 minutes going to the south. What we don't have is the second line that we have to calculate. Right, we are done with the latitude. We go to longitude. Our longitude, you can see they are here. It's 26 degrees and 10 minutes to the east. And we are exactly on that line from our point here. So nothing is going to change. We are just taking the 26 degrees and 10 minutes here. Those are the coordinates of our northwest corner. Remember, always we start with latitude and we go to longitude. So we go to check our responses here. If we check our responses from the question, we want a response that has got 29 degrees 02 minutes latitude and 26 degrees and 10 minutes longitude. Then we were worried about the second values. So this one is out completely. It has 26 degrees, which is wrong. This one is also out. It has 26 degrees, which means our correct response should be between B and C. These are the two possible responses. These ones are out. We have ordered them out. So we have 2902. The same as what we have identified here, 2902 and 2610. 2902 is here, 2610 is here. So automatically, this is the correct response without wasting time. Without doing calculations, this is the correct response because the minute is wrong for this one and the minute here is correct, but the minute here has also made this one a wrong response. So without even calculating, you are going to get your answer by just analyzing the minute and the degree and the minute values without even calculating the second values. This being a multiple choice question, it's a 1-mark question. It gives you the clue that you are not supposed to spend much time. But if it was maybe the other form of question, which is not multiple choice, you're supposed to do the calculations of how you calculate the second values. But for this instance, the correct response is C because we have, sorry, it's not C, we are saying it's B because B is the one which is correct. C has been phased out because of the wrong minute value for latitude. So the correct response for that one is B. Move on to the next question. Refer to the orthophoto. Determine the true bearing of spot height 1431 at 6 in block 1431 in blocks G, at G in block A3 to trigonometrical station 96 at H. Right, we want the true bearing of those between those 2 points. So we want the bearing of that spot height on the orthophoto map. Right, let's go to our orthophoto map and check what is happening there. Right, our orthophoto map is here. Right, we are looking at these two. We have a spot height at this particular point at 6, and we have a spot height again at that particular point. So what do we need to do there? We need to find the bearing of this from this. So what we need to do, we need to draw your north-south line, your true north line through the feature. You should make sure that it runs parallel to your longitude line here. You draw a straight line through your feature, right? Assuming that it's parallel and it's straight like this. It means your true north is here. And you link the 2 points by a straight line. You draw a straight line connecting the 2 points in that direction, and you get to the feature. So what angle do we want when we're measuring true bearing? It's an angle measured in a clockwise direction, starting from true north to the line connecting the 2 features. So it means we want an angle starting from here, going all the way until we get to this line. This is the size of the angle that is required for that true bearing. So without wasting time, we know that this is a straight line from true north to south here. This is 180 degrees. You don't need to worry about this using your protractor to calculate an angle that you know. You know that this straight line is 180 degrees. You only need to measure from here to there, this additional angle. You add it to 180. So if you measure this angle, you place your protractor with 0 reading here and 180 reading there, and you check the reading on the protractor where this line is crossing the edge of your protractor. So from my calculations and from what I have measured here, I found the angle to be 136 degrees. So it now means the true bearing is 108 degrees from true north to south plus the additional 136. That is going to be the actual size of the true bearing angle for that particular those particular features, which is going to give us 316 degrees. That is the value of that particular true bearing calculation. Right, moving on to the next question. Calculate the average gradient. Calculate the average gradient from spot height 1358 at G in block B in block A3 to trigonometrical station 96 at H. Use the information. The trig is this 7.8 centimeters, the distance between the two. Right. So let's go to the map and do the calculation. Right. We are looking at G. There is our trig. There is our spot height, and also the trigonometrical station 96. Right. We find that the trigonometrical station 96 is here at H. There is our trigonometrical station. We want to calculate the gradient, average gradient between this spot height and this trig station here. Those are our 2 points on the map. Right. So the distance between has been calculated for us. We have been given the distance between the two features, the straight line distance, according to the calculations that are the measurements that have been done for us. We don't need to measure anything. The distance between these two features has been given as 7.8 centimeters. Right. So what do we need to do? We need now to apply our formula. Gradient is equal to vertical interval over horizontal equivalence. What is vertical interval? Vertical interval is the difference in height between the two features which are given, which means we should subtract the height of the smaller feature from the height of the highline feature. So if we check the height of this is 1358 for that one. Then if we also check the height of the other feature is for this station here, right? You should be worried here. There are two figures. There's a station number and also the height of the trig station. It is saying trigonometrical station 96. This is not the height of the station. 96 is the station number. The height for the station is this one given here, which is in that instance 1455.6. So it's 1455.6 meters minus the height of the spot height, which is 1358. If we subtract these two, they are all in meters, we get 97.6 meters. This is our VI. We put it aside. Then we go to our HE. Our HE is the actual ground distance between the two features. How do we calculate that? It has been measured for us according to the map information provided. The distance is 7.8 according to what was measured for us. Then what is the map scale? It's 1:50,000. If you want to convert the measurement on the scale to a scale of 1:50,000 in meters, you just multiply by 500 meters. So multiplying this 7.8 times 500 meters, it gives us 3,900 meters. This is our HE. So coming back to our formula, we are now taking our HE and our VI according to what we have calculated. So now VI over HE is now equal to 7.6, this is in meters, over 3,900 meters. Given these two, the meter is going to calculate to cancel with the meter. Now we remain with 97.6 over 300. Remember gradient, we have to make this one unit or equal to 1. The numerator has to be 1 always. So what do we make this one equal to 1? We divide the numerator by 97.6. And we also divide the denominator by the same value, 97.6. If we divide this on the numerator, we get 1. As to what we're going to get if we divide 3,900 by 97.6 is going to give us 39.96 if we round it off to 2 decimal places. This is the value of our gradient, average gradient between the 2 points. 1 is to 39.96 in that ratio format. That is our gradient between the two points from the map. Right. I think it's understood. Let's move on to the next question. Right. Moving on to the next question. The next question is saying, is the gradient to the answer above, which is our gradient of 1s2 39.96, steep or gentle? Is it a steeper gradient or a gentle gradient? Right, what you check there, you check from the value of the denominator of the fraction. Our ratio is 1s to 39.96. Right, a gradient which starts from 1s to 30 is starting to become gentle. One which is less than 30, we regard it as generally steeper. But if the value of the denominator is 30 and above, that becomes a gentle gradient. So for that, given that this one is 39.96, which is almost 1:40, we can safely say it's a gentle gradient. Moving on to the next question. Why would this gradient to the answer be an advantage for road construction? We are saying we want to construct a road over a gentle landscape. Definitely it's going to be easy to construct. Easy construction. We're not struggling with steeper gradient. We're just working on a gentle gradient. It's easy to construct the road. And also it's cheaper for the construction. Cheaper to construct the road. It's an advantage, which will be emanating from the gradient of the area. Right, then we go on to map interpretation. We are now moving on to the next question, where we are relating our theory to the map work. Right, the first question 321. The main settlement pattern at area 8 in block D1 and E1 on the orthophoto map is, right, let's check the orthophoto map. We are looking at area 8, right, on the orthophoto map. Let's go to our area 8. Right, let me quickly erase this workings here in the markings. Right, going to area 8, we want to check where area 8 is and check the pattern of the settlement there. Right, coming here, our area 8 is here in this red box here. We want to analyze the settlement pattern in that particular block. Right, so remember, when you're looking at this, you see that the houses are too close to each other and they are located in that manner there. Do not confuse between settlement pattern and settlement shape. We only have two shapes, we only have two patterns rather of settlements. Either it's clustered or nucleated, or it's dispersed. Those are the two patterns. So if anything which doesn't address dispersed or nucleated is not pattern, it's shape. Shape and pattern are not the same. So let's go to our responses. Right. Definitely, linear is out, circular is out, but these are shapes of the settlement. They are not patterns. So the correct pattern there, according to what we have seen, the houses are too close to each other. The response which is correct is nucleated. Right, let's go to the next one. What evidence suggests that this suburb is still undergoing development? We are looking at block B4 on the B2 on the topographic map. Right, B2, block B2 is this one here. We are looking at this area in block B2. What evidence here in this block which shows that the area is still under construction? Our evidence is here. Roads under construction. It talks about roads being under construction. It means the area is a newly developed area. We cannot have roads under construction in a fully developed area. So that is the evidence that we have. Moving on to the next question. Explain the negative impact that this development could have on the farming area. There is a nearby farming area. This farming area here, the cultivated lands. What negative impact can this development happening here have on this farming area? Definitely, it limits the expansion of the farming area. Because now there's development there and there's a nearby farm, it also means that there is a limitation of expansion area for the cultivated area. Can no longer expand going to the south and west and southeast rather, because of the development which is being done on this particular area here. Right, you can think of other aspects, other effects that can that the development can have on the farming area. Just for the sake of the discussion, we're just highlighting those few. Right, move on to the next. Refer to the residential area at 9 in block B4 and C4 on the orthophoto map. Residential area 9, right. We're going to look at it. How did topography influence the development of the gridiron pattern evident in this residential area? Right, we're saying it is having a grid area. Let's go to the map, orthophoto, that is at area 9. Area 9 is here. We're looking at this particular area here. We are saying the area is having a grid pattern, this built up area here. What has influenced the development of this gridiron pattern being possible to develop there in that particular area? That is what the question wants us to attempt to. Right. If you check there, the steepness of the area, you can see one contour line is here, the next one is there, the next one is there. They are far apart spaced, which means that the area is generally flat. So with that reason, being that the area is flat, it will also mean that it is possible for the construction of straight streets, which will give us a grid. Because remember, the streets are straight, going in another direction, and also crossing at right angles in another direction. So the area being flat, it also means it's possible for the construction of those streets in a flat area. And also the area, if you check, there are no obstructions in the area. Like, for example, there are no hills in that particular area, which will limit the construction of the grid pattern. Because whenever there are physical features like hills in the area, it will limit the possibility of a grid being possible. It will maybe end up being a planned irregular in that particular area because of those physical features. So there are no physical features there which act as obstruction to the construction of a streets in that particular residential on that particular built up area. So that is basically the reason why we are justifying it that way. Explain one economic advantage that residents in residential area 9 will experience as a result of its location. Right, what is the advantage of these residents here? Right, if we check the economic advantage that is definite here is for transportation purposes. There's this road here, which is linking to this major road here. So the economic advantage there is they are linked to major transport routes, which makes it easier for their movement, and also which makes it cheaper for their movement. They are linked by these major routes here, which are just this major route stretching in this direction, and also this route passing on the southern direction. Basically, that is the evident economic advantage that we can talk about, them being closer to major routes, being linked to major transport routes. Right, we go on to the next question. Refer to blocks A1 or A2 and B1, B2. Identify the primary activity practiced in block A1, A2. We are on the topographic map. And B1, B2, primary economic activity. A1, A2, B1, B2. Right, let's go to, let me just erase off these markings. A1, A2, block A1 is this one. Block A1, A2, B1, B2. We're looking at these blocks here. From somewhere here, A1, A2, until here, B1, B2, somewhere there. Yes, in this area. What is an economic activity which is happening in this particular area? The question is saying we must identify the primary activity practiced in those blocks. If we check this area here, unfortunately the map is faint, but predominantly this whole area, it has cultivated land. This whole area here, it has cultivated land. So what is the primary activity that we have there is agriculture or cultivation. That is the major primary activity that we can talk about. In those blocks, there is cultivated land, which means there's agriculture, which is a primary activity happening on that part of the map. Right, then we'll move on to the next one. Why is this primary activity? To question 321, A, practiced on a large scale. Why is it practiced on a large scale? Why do we find agriculture happening in that area on a large scale, because you see the area covered by the cultivated land is wide. The reasons which are facilitating the development of that large scale farming happening on that particular section on a large scale. That is what the question is asking about. Why is it happening on a large scale in that particular area? Right. The justification there, we can talk of availability of flatland. It's happening on a flatland and there's space for expansion. It's one justification. There is large space which is flat, and also there's space for expansion. That is why they are doing it on a large scale. They have large space which is flat in that area. Besides that, we can also talk of the fact that there is water availability in the area. Remember, if you check, there's a dam here, which is a source of water supply for the cultivated land. So this dam is equally big enough to supply water to this whole area. That is why they are able to cultivate on a large scale, because they are guaranteed of water supply from that particular dam there. And also, if we check in terms of transport, there is a road here, which is also linking this particular farmland to other surrounding areas and also to other surrounding settlements. So that road also acts as a facilitation factor for large scale production, because they can now be able to supply the produce to the surrounding markets because of the access to the road. Right. Identify 2 strategies that were put in place in Block A1, A2, B1, B2 to ensure a regular supply of water for the primary activity. What has been done here to ensure that there is a regular supply of water in this particular area? Right. Number one is this dam here. There's a dam. The dam here acts as a way of supplying reliable water to the farming activity. And also, besides the dam, if we check, unfortunately, the map is faint. There are some reservoirs. I think there are 2 or 3 reservoirs in the area, one being there. And also, there's another one there. If you check that area, and they're not the only ones, they are about 2 or 3 reservoirs in the area. The reservoirs, they're also meant to store water so that they can be able to access water at whatever point in time during the process of farming. So it's number one, there's a dam, and also there are also some reservoirs in that particular area which are meant to store water. Right, moving on to the next question. We move on to question 3.3, which is the last part, which is part of the GIS, the Geographical Information Systems. Right. The process of converting data from raster to vector format is converting from raster to vector format is called data dash. Is it data analysis or integration, layering, or manipulation? Right. Basically, the correct response there is data manipulation. When we're talking of converting or changing data, we are manipulating it. We change the data to suit the desires of the user or to suit the needs of the user. So basically, data manipulation becomes the correct response. Right. Moving on to the next question. Explain how the data was converted from aerial photographs used to make orthophoto maps and into the topographical map. Basically, how we convert this, we can use georeferencing. Through using georeferencing. With georeferencing, we target the coordinates of given features and we transpose them on the right location on the other map by using georeferencing. Or we can also use vector data integration. We integrate features from the particular map where we transpose them to the other map. Or we can use topological integration. Those are some of the methods that can be used to transpose that data, to change it, to manipulate it to another form, coming from topographic, coming from an area of view photograph, which is the orthophoto, to convert it to a topographical map. Or you can also use what we call data Correlation. Right, those are some of the techniques that can be used to ultimately transpose the data or to change it from one format to another. Right, moving on to the next question. Redraw block A3 and insert only the following features. Right, this one we're going to go to the map, topographical map. We want to redraw block A3 and try to check those features. Block A3, let me erase off those markings. Right, coming to block A3, our block A3 is this one here. Let me try to trace it so that we can be able to focus on that particular block only. Right, it comes from there, it comes from here, it ends here, and it ends there. That is our block A3. Right, checking on A3, we want to redraw it, which means we must also have our own block where we are supposed to redraw and put the features which are asked in the question. We also draw ours here. We are assuming this is a blank space. There is nothing inside. We are going to copy what we are asked to copy from here to there. Right, so we have our blocks. This is the original block, which is A3, and our own drawing is this one, where we are going to follow the instructions of the question. The question is saying, redraw block A3 and insert the following features. A human-made line feature. Right, if we check here, we have a human-made line feature, which is this road here. It's a human-made and it's a line feature. And where is it? On the extreme southwest of our map. So coming here, if we are to trace this map here, it's somewhere here. We draw our road like this. This is a line feature. This is assuming this is our road, right? We have drawn our road. This is a line feature. And then if you check here, there is also a line feature, which is the hiking trail. Where is it? On the northwest part, something like this. Something like this. That is our hiking trail. So these are our two line features. I don't see any other line feature there, unless if there's another line feature that you can also point out. But basically, these are the two line features that we have. This road here and this hiking trail. Those are the human-made line features. Then we want a human-made polygon feature. A human-made polygon feature that we have here, we have this cultivated land happening to be on the extreme corner here. There's a cultivation which is here. So we can also trace our cultivated land here. We indicate that this is a cultivated land. So basically that is what we are required to do. We have identified our human-made polygon feature, which is a cultivated land, and our line features, we have the two of them, a hiking trail and that road on the other side. So we are done with that. That is what we are expected to do in that particular question. Right, moving on to the next question, we want to move on to question number 3.3.4. Right, what is it saying? Let's go to the question. 3.3.4 is saying, define the concept data integration. When you are integrating data, this is a concept. You can define it according to your understanding, but you should address the basics. Right, my simple definition, I will simply define it as combining. Integrating at least bringing together. So I will say it's combining data from multiple sources or from multiple formats, whatever, into a unified view. That could be my simple definition. Combining data from multiple sources or formats into a unified view. We're bringing different forms of data to make it, to combine it into one view. That is data integration. We're bringing different sets of data together so that we have a unified view. We want the data to be viewed as one unit. So we bring the different sets of data and reference it geographically, and we see the relationship in one unified view. That is data integration. Then we go on to the last question. Name the methods of data integration used on the topographical map. The method of data integration that can be used on topographic maps. We can use this one, right? When integrating data, there's vector data integration that we can also use there, that we can use vector data integration. That is what we can use mainly for that particular section for the orthophoto map. Or we can use georeferencing to integrate the data from different sources. We bring in data from different sources and we use those particular formats to integrate the data into one unified view. Right, there's a question that I also want to make an emphasis. I think I skipped that question, or there's a question number 3.32. Used this one, which was talking about converting vertical area photographs to orthophoto maps. Right, here it was saying explain the data, how the data was converted. Right, how the data is converted, we use what we call automatic terrain extraction. Or we can also use what we call manual digitization. As a method of converting that data to the different data sets. Or we can use also what we call semi-automatic feature extraction. Semi-automatic feature extraction. Right. Basically, when you're looking at those ones, those are the methods that we can use to convert the data from the different data sets to another data set, from a raster format, which is part of the orthophoto map and area of view, and to a topographic, which is a vector data format. Right. So given this discussion that we have had, I think this has ultimately brought us to the end of our paper, based on the description of the questions that were asked and the possible responses that were relevant to the set of questions which were posed for us to answer. And in my own rating, I would rate the paper as basically a fair paper. There was fairness in terms of the nature of the content requirements, and also in terms of the ranking of the levels of the questions, and also basically the questioning, the language which was used in the paper. I can rate it as generally fair and direct. There were no complicated questions that basically would pose confusions on understanding or in assimilating what the question requirements were. So based on the discussion that we have had, I think this is going to help you prepare for other papers in future, or also it is going to help you assess how you hope you would have achieved in the examination. You can give a guideline of your rating of your performance of on the paper based on the discussion that we have just had. But till we meet again in other discussions, our discussion now comes to a conclusion. We will meet in other discussions to follow. Your host, Conrad Mupinguri. Thank you. Hello, good day, learners. Welcome to our memo discussion for Geography Paper 2, November 2024. Right, we are going to go through the questions and give a brief explanation, some concepts, or justify why we are opting for given responses as the correct responses to the given questions. As usual, we understand that our paper is comprised of two sections, with question 1 and question 2, which is our question number 1, rural urban settlements, 60 marks in the economic geography of South Africa. 60 marks in section B, as usual, is geographical skills and techniques, which is composed of 30 marks. Right. Going to our first question. Our first question on rural and urban settlements. It's a matching column question. We're supposed to match a description to a given geographical concept. Right. So we have the description on the left side, which is supposed to be matched with the corresponding correct geographical term on the right-hand side. Right. We are starting with the first description. It says, exact piece of land that a settlement is built on. We are looking at the exact piece of land. The correct response is a site of a settlement. Right. While we're saying a site, we're saying a site that is the physical place which is occupied by a given settlement. So it's the exact land, piece of land on which a settlement is established. The situation, we are now relating the settlement to the surrounding environment. So the correct response for number 111 is it. Then we go to the next question. A situation of commercial livestock farm is influenced by. The situation of a commercial livestock farm. Right, our question here is based on a commercial livestock. What influences the establishment of a commercial livestock farm in the surrounding, regarding its surroundings? So regarding its surroundings, we're looking at a commercial livestock farm. We know that when we're talking of commercial farmers, their main purpose is to produce produce for sale. So they should consider the availability of markets in their surroundings. So the correct response is Z for question number 112. Right, I'll go to number 113. Settlements located close to a water source in arid areas. For example, if you can talk of the desert areas, you find that settlements are established on the oasis, which is the source of water. What kind of settlement is that one? Remember, we classify settlements in relationship to water. We have a wet point and a dry point settlement. So for this instance, our correct response is supposed to be a wet point settlement. The reason for the establishment is to access water because the area is arid or is dry. Right, we'll go to the next question. The shape of this settlement is influenced by a river. We're looking at the shape of the settlement and how does a settlement shape develop in regard to it being located to where there is a river. Right, you tend to find that the correct response is linear. Linear from line. The settlement will develop in a line along the river. Right, the largest rural type of settlement, remember when I'm looking at the urban hierarchy, we have 3 types of settlements which are rural, then we go to the urban settlement starting with a town. So the largest for the rural is a village. Remember, on the hierarchy of settlements from the rural area, the smallest one is an isolated farmstead. And the next one is a hamlet. And the third one is a village, which is the largest of the 3 rural settlements.